crisis go to waste. This is an aphorism attributed to Winston Churchill, the famous Prime Minister of UK. Whether he actually said it or not, it fits into the kind of thinking and the depth of understanding that he has about the world. He is supposed to have said it soon after the Second World War, and then they are thinking about setting up the United Nations. But there are many things which have been attributed to Winston Churchill, and all of them may not be true. Some people think that Shakespeare's Hamlet is a book of quotations, because you're always hearing about quotes from Hamlet. He's the author of a book of quotations. And in the process, many witticisms, many clever words, even some insulting words have been attributed to Winston Churchill. For example, there is a story that Lady Astor was very upset about Winston for something. And she said it in Parliament that Winston, if I were your wife, I would put poison in your tea. So everybody was taken aback. And Sir Winston stood up and said, "Madam, if you are my wife, I would gladly drink it." On another occasion, he was very angry with the British Parliament and he shouted at them and he said, "Half the members of this house are fools." There was a huge outcry. Everybody started shouting, "We want an apology. How can he say this?" It started for several minutes. And when they settled down, Sir Winston stood up and said, "Mr. Speaker, sir, I apologize. I should have said, half the members of this house are not fools," he said. Nobody could protest about that. And the most cruel statement attributed to him relates to Mahatma Gandhi. He would never have said it. But people say he said, when he read about the Bengal famine, that, shortage of food and problems of various kinds, he asked, apparently on the fire, if there is so much of shortage of food, why is Gandhi not dead yet? So he could be very witty, he could be very cruel. But there are several things that he said are very valuable, like what he said, if you are walking in hell, keep walking. And that is more or less the same sense in what he said about the good crisis. Because when you face a crisis, you think that this is the end of the world. And we have had that experience very recently, not just once, several times. The Second World War was one of them. Till date, that was the biggest challenge that the world faced and the biggest tragedy that humankind faced. People thought that the world will not recover from this crisis. But several good things came out of it. Second World War was the only war in which, or at least so far, in which nuclear weapons were used. So that was the end of humanity. If nuclear weapons to be used, what would happen? And what is the solution which was found? The solution was to have the United Nations. Of course, the expectations was that the United Nations will rid the world of the scourge of war. That is what is said in the preamble. And the quote from the Bible was also used, saying, "We shall shape swords into plowshares." Neither of this happened. We still have many weapons. we still have limitations of what the UN could do. But the very fact that an institution of that kind was created, with all its disabilities, weaknesses, is a great thing. And that is why the first Secretary General of the United Nations, Dag Hammarskjöld, not the first one, one of the Secretaries General of the United Nations said, the UN was not created to make heaven on earth, but to prevent it from going to hell. We haven't gone to hell yet, so don't expect that the UN will take you to heaven, but at least we have to respect. 75 years later, the United Nations still not fulfilled its mandate. But it has come about to be a kind of conscience of humanity, and also a hope. Even those who do not know anything about the United Nations think that, yeah, the United Nations is there, so we are safe. So that is the kind of thought that he had when he said it. But basically, it is an expression of optimism. If you knew this sentence before, maybe during the 9/11 attack, during the pandemic, and even during the Ukraine war, we would have had some comfort. After all, these are crises from which we can learn. But have we learned it? Last decade, that is 2001 to 2020, I call it the dreadful decades. 2001, you know, the attack on New York. Unprecedented, unthinkable, unimaginable event happened. But you know that Nostradamus was predicted it centuries ago. He said 2 metal birds will fall on the metropolis. A river will flow with blood. And he didn't say living people, he said undead people will walk along the streets of the city. Undead people. It happened. 2 metal birds, very clear, and blood all over the place. But how did we recover from that? Terrorism was always there in the world. But this kind of terrorism was different because it made the world's superpower, the biggest power in the world, with the capacity to destroy the world 55 times over, was humiliated by 10 people who had nothing but forks and knives picked up from the aircraft. And the fall of the United States had started. The decline of the United States started at that time. There was no way out. The world thought that the world that we knew in 2000 will not be there. I remember we were all in a conference of the Atomic Energy Agency when the news came for the first time. So the chairman said we adjourn so that we can go and watch what has happened. You know, the US ambassador raised his hand and said, Mr. Chairman, please continue. As though nothing has happened. We will overcome it. But within minutes, all of us were out and only the US ambassador was sitting there. Those are the last words. The United States changed a lot. But look at the situation today. What do we think of the 9/11? We think of it only as a nuisance at the American airports. And you are virtually stripped. And there was a nice cartoon where a man was holding his all his clothes in hand and walking naked to the airport. He said, it's better to walk like this and put on clothes after they have checked me. That is the kind of situation that has happened. But one thing happened. After that, not a single terrorist attack has taken place in the United States. They made aviation much easier and much more safe. So the inventions that happened soon after the crisis has really wiped out the most difficult parts of it. And we have even found opportunities to how to do these things in a most sophisticated manner. And this is the scene that you will all remember when it hit the two towers. Now you will not recognize it, the place is changed, but no two towers, only one tower there this time. And then came so this was 2001, when we had an economic slowdown, a meltdown, that was a big crisis, less visible, less dramatic. But G20 came out of it, and many regional organizations came into the field, and there is now better understanding of the economic situation of the world. But then the most horrible thing that we have seen in our own lives, in our own time, directly, whichever part of the world you were. Once Barack Obama said as President of the United States, we should be aware of pandemics. Then he said, not because the pandemic will come here, because our health situation is very good. But remember, anyone from Africa or Latin America or Asia can reach the United States in 4 hours. Therefore, we should be aware of the pandemic. It's exactly the reverse that happened. The pandemic came from the United States, from the most developed world to the developing world. In fact, the developing world has seen less of a tragedy. But what happened was that because it came from the developed world, there was nobody to take care of the developing world because they had their own problems. And that was the tragedy of this pandemic. Earlier, diseases like HIV, AIDS, etc. It was the developed world which had the time and the leisure to do that. But now, they have no time to do it for the rest of the world. And so there was virtually a reversal of India providing vaccines to the Americans rather than the other way around. But look at the way we found vaccines. Look at the way how we found that ordinary things that we always did for centuries, washing of hands, wearing a mask, keeping away from others, became this answer to this question. You know, during the plague, the greatest thing they did was to ask people to wash hands. It's not a new technology. Now my watch tells me when I wash my hands, not yet, you are done, only 10 seconds, please do the rest. It has become that much important, washing of hands. And what have we learned from this? We have learned that there is possibility of cooperation, possibility of dealing with a crisis when you can deal with it. But unfortunately, the United Nations did not do anything because the Chinese were in the dock. And as it happened, the day the United Nations wanted to deal with the issue, China happened to be the president of the Security Council. And he refused to hold a meeting of the United Nations Security Council when the greatest threats to human existence came up in the world. And the United Nations reached the rock bottom of credibility on account of that. But there again, now we have learned to live with COVID. And that is what has happened to us. And now we are not as scared as we were. We do various things and more as a routine matter. And the medicines and the vaccines have made that less fatal. But all of us have a sense of morbidity. All of us have a sense of mortality after that. And that has made human beings better. You write your will early, not wait for the last breath. You start thinking about your children early. At one time it seemed that everybody above 65 years should be eliminated. And I believe in China they tried to do that because they didn't have space for the others. So without realizing it, we have changed. And our attitude towards life has changed for the better. Yes, we lost people. We lost very valuable lives in front of us. And they had to die alone. Nobody could even enter there. Even their funerals, nobody could attend. So from that situation to a possibility of living with COVID as though it is an influenza, mankind has come very much further. But human depravity did not end there. Even when COVID was at its height, countries saw opportunities for a change in the world order. China suddenly became very aggressive. They came and occupied 1,000 kilometers of land on the border, which is not disputed. It flexed its muscles in Hong Kong, in Taiwan, in South China Sea, and various places. Because they felt that the United States had failed to contain this disease, and therefore it would not be the leader of the world again. And therefore, they tried very hard. They are supposed to overtake the United States in, say, 10 to 15 years. They wanted to shorten that and become the leader. And that is why we find on the whole crisis, including what happened to us on our borders. So in that time itself, there was a struggle for power, a struggle for world leadership. And that is what happened on 24th of February 2022, when President Putin, who was a very low kind of figure in the international calculations after the Soviet Union was dismantled. After 20 years having been quiet, he started dreaming about the Soviet Empire. He denounced Lenin, Stalin, Brezhnev. Everybody had said, I'm looking at the czars of Russia. What Lenin, Stalin, etc. did was to destroy Russia by bringing communism. And so what he started to do is not just an attack on Ukraine. It is not just an attack to capture Kyiv. No. He has a much bigger ambition. We talked about that. We have to restore the glory and glamour of the United States, of the Soviet Union. Very far-fetched. But that's what he's up to. After 105 days, 110 days, we still do not know where this war is going. What he is trying to do. The NATO and the United States have decided not to fight with weapons, but to fight with sanctions. And that is the tragedy of this war. Because sanctions can destroy not only the victims, not only who are targeted, but by many, many others, including us. So, whether this war ends today or not, the fuel prices have skyrocketed. Food shortage is going to be extremely urgent and serious. And that is why India is already taking several steps to save ourselves from that situation, though we are being accused of supporting Russia by doing that. It's not a matter of supporting Russia. The world is going to change. The world of 2023 will not be the same as in 2022. So many power centers have emerged already. Finland and Sweden have applied for NATO membership. These are things which never happen. But there again, I'm sure whoever wins this war, our Prime Minister said, nobody will win this war. He's right. But we will learn the lessons. For the sake of your own security, you cannot challenge somebody else's sovereignty. And therefore, that lesson we are learning now. To conclude, these crises are not unusual. But the crises that we faced recently have been so disastrous, so difficult, but it has proved to us what our friend Winston Churchill said. A crisis is an opportunity. Never let a good crisis go without mankind learning something from it. Thank you very much.